Pacific coast between Los Angeles and San Diego lies Newport Beach. Located in the middle of Orange County, Newport Beach was known for its 7 tiny man-made islands housing expensive mansions, many with their own docks and yachts, as expensive as the homes. The area is protected by Balboa Peninsula, a long stretch of land that encapsulates the islands and creates a natural harbor. Although she didn't live in one of the mansions, 23-year-old Denise Huber did live with her parents in an upscale neighborhood of Newport Beach. Her shoulder-length, straight brown hair and striking blue eyes made her very popular with the boys. Denise first met Steve Horrocks when she worked at the old spaghetti factory on the Balboa Peninsula in 1987. Steve was a bartender and she was a waitress. Though they weren't romantically involved at the time, 4 years later, in 1991, Denise and Steve start dating. Steve still worked at the old spaghetti factory, and Denise had graduated from the University of California at Irvine with a degree in social sciences. The job market was tight at the time, and she couldn't find a job in her field. She took another waitressing job at the Cannery Seafood Restaurant and worked part-time as a cashier at the Broadway department store. On the afternoon of June 2nd, 1991, Steve won free tickets to see the singer Morrissey later that evening. The concert was being held at the Forum, a venue in Inglewood, nearly an hour north in Los Angeles County. Side note, I have been to a show at the Forum, and it was actually very cool. Unfortunately, Steve had to work that night, so he suggested Denise and his friend Rob Calvert go together. Denise was also good friends with Rob, so the two agreed to go to the concert together. After the concert, Denise and Rob decided to stop for a drink at the El Paso Cantina in Long Beach. Once there, they called Steve and invited him to meet them, but he declined. He had just gotten off work and was trying to save money. While having late-night drinks, Denise and Rob ran into an acquaintance of Denise's named Ross. Denise knew that Ross had had a crush on her for years. Ross asked Denise if he could speak to her privately outside. When Denise returned, she explained to Rob that Ross had asked her out and she turned him down. Rob and Denise stayed at El Paso Cantina until they closed after 1 a.m., then drove toward home. Denise dropped Rob off at his home in Huntington Beach just after 2 a.m. and continued her drive. The drive from Huntington Beach to Denise's home in the East Bluff neighborhood of Newport Beach ran along Highway 1, the Pacific Coast Highway. However, when her parents awoke the next morning, they realized that Denise never made it home that night. It wasn't unheard of for Denise to stay out all night. After all, she was 23 years old, but it was extremely out of character for her to not let her parents know. Panicked, her parents, Dennis and Ione Huber, called Denise's friend Tammy Brown. Although Tammy had known that she had gone to the concert, she hadn't heard from her since. Tammy gathered several friends, and alongside Denise's parents, they both set out to look for her. They had searched the whole day, but there was no sign of Denise. Just before sundown that evening, Tammy located Denise's car was no sign of Denise at this point. Her keys, purse, and wallet were not found at the scene, and there were no signs of tampering with the tire. The side wall had failed, and there were skid marks showing that it had indeed blown out. Everything indicated that she had pulled over and walked off of the freeway to find help. But one thing was troubling. There were no fingerprints in the car, not even her own. It was obvious that it had been wiped clean. Despite the car being wiped down, police initially believed she had possibly run off with a boyfriend without notifying her parents. Dennis and Ione, however, knew this wasn't the case and were hit with an unescapable sense of dread. Their daughter had been taken against her will. Okay, so I'm just going to pause for a second. I don't know why. It drives me crazy. I feel like this happens so often in the true crime stories that I have researched that the police just assume that a girl is running off with their boyfriend. Not to say that that doesn't happen, because I know that it does. But I feel like that's always such a typical assumption when these families know their child so well and know that historically they would always communicate and check in, and they have this gut feeling and knowing that something is terribly wrong, but the police think otherwise. It literally drives me crazy whenever I read or learn something like that, because I feel like every true crime story where this is kind of the situation, something terrible always ends up being the case, and it's never that the girl just ran off with her boyfriend. Although Robert, Calvert, Steve, Horrocks, and Ross, the young man that asked her out at the bar that night, were all initially suspects, they were all cooperative and had alibis, and they were quickly eliminated. I guess that's good, because my first initial thought was that Ross had something to do with it. So at this point, police were left with very few clues. They did what they could. They used helicopters to search the immediate area and trained dogs to find her scent, but were ultimately left with nothing to go on. She had simply vanished. Denise's parents turned to the public for help. They raised $10,000 in donations to offer a reward for the return of their daughter. They placed a huge 30-foot banner on the side of an apartment building that faced the freeway where her car was found. They were looking for any information at all from anyone that may have seen their daughter on the side of the road that night. Giant aerial banners were pulled behind planes, and they placed billboards all over the area. Despite tips that came in, nothing really seemed to help. Denise's parents never gave up hope. Her father's car became a rolling billboard. When he was in public and he saw a tall girl with long brown hair on the street, he would have to stop to see her face and make sure it wasn't Denise. That breaks my heart. Just like this idea that this mom and dad are non-stop searching for their daughter and, pulling out all the stops to try and get any information without any luck. I just keep picturing a man, looking at these girls as they walk by that could potentially resemble his daughter, only to figure out that it wasn't his actual daughter. Oh my gosh, that just breaks my heart. The story of the missing girl was run on both local news and nationally on Inside Edition and America's Most Wanted. At loss for options, the family accepted the help of unsolicited psychics, but nothing helped. They even took the family dog to the scene where the car was. According to Dennis, the dog went crazy and picked up her scent. He followed the dog through a hole in the fence along the highway and to a hotel room at the nearby Marriott Courtyard Hotel. Police followed the lead, but this too ended up being a dead end. The Huber family hired a private investigator who clashed with detectives. The private investigator believed that Denise had been abducted elsewhere, and her car had been placed on the Corona Del Mar freeway as a distraction. After all, Denise was traveling from Huntington Beach to Newport Beach. She wouldn't have needed to go that far inland to get home. She normally would have taken the Pacific Coast Highway. That's actually a really interesting point that I did not consider, given that I don't know the geography of that area. I've been to these areas, but I wouldn't know the freeways off the top of my head like that, so that's interesting. It says that 3 years went by with no additional clues. Police checked Denise's dental records against every unidentified body that was found, but by that point, the likelihood of Denise ever being found, dead or alive, was extremely slim. Eventually, Denise's parents gave up hope and moved to North Dakota. On the 3rd anniversary of her disappearance, Denise's mother told the Los Angeles Times, quote, "As time goes by, I realize Denise is probably not alive. Just to know and not have to wonder what happened would be easier than this mystery." End quote. Yeah, I feel like there's never a good situation when we're talking about these true crime stories, but it always makes me so sad to think about the families that don't get answers, that have to sit there and wonder what happened. Again, finding the body doesn't change what happened, of course, and it's still brutally awful for the family, but at least there's some degree of closure that I think brings a sense of peace compared to situations where they never get any kind of answers or never find the body. Okay, so the next part of this says, Prescott, Arizona lies halfway between the Phoenix Valley and the mountains of Flagstaff. Its small town, Old West feel was a welcome respite from the scorching July heat of Phoenix. Elaine and Jack Court were visiting the Prescott swap meet and looking to buy some paint for their paint supply business when they met 34-year-old John Famolaro. Famolaro was working as a self-employed house painter and had been selling paint at the swap meet. Famolaro told Jack and Elaine that he had much more paint to sell them and invited them to his home after the swap meet ended for the day. When Elaine and Jack arrived at his house, they were a bit surprised. Famolaro was clearly a hoarder. Though he lived in a nice house located in the Prescott Country Club, it was cluttered with junk. From floor to ceiling, the entire house was filled with random items, deteriorating cardboard boxes, and hundreds of paint cans. Elaine and Jack purchased the paint they needed, and as they left the property, they noticed a 24-foot Ryder rental truck parked in the driveway. Weeds that had grown to waist height around the truck made it obvious that it had been there for quite some time. Not only was it out of place parked in the driveway, but they noticed that there was a very long electrical extension cord leading from the house into the back of the truck. Jack knew that truck rental companies didn't usually sell trucks to the public without painting over the logo on the side and asked Elaine to jot down the license plate number before she and Jack left. The couple Sheriff Department searched for the license plate. The truck had indeed been stolen. It was originally rented in California and never returned. The extension cord leading into the rear of the truck most likely meant that it was being used as a methamphetamine lab. Prepared for a drug raid, sheriff's deputies paid a visit to John Famalaro's home. When they opened the back of the Ryder truck, it looked similar to what Jack and Elaine had seen inside of the house. The entire truck was filled with paint cans and cardboard boxes. It wasn't the meth lab that they were expecting, but detectives were curious to find what was at the end of the long extension cord. Pushing aside the boxes and paint cans, the cord led to a large 15 cubic foot chest freezer at the very back of the truck. Oh no. This is not going to be good. Police cut the thick masking tape that held the lid shut and opened it. Inside, they found something wrapped in large black plastic bags and a few smaller white plastic bags. Lord have mercy, I don't like this. All the bags seemed to be covering one large item. Initially, officers assumed Famalaro was just storing a deer carcass that he had killed, but when they felt part of the black bag, they realized that what they felt was a frozen human arm. Not okay. As they peeled away parts of the plastic bags, they revealed the frozen body of a young woman. She was crunched into the fetal position with her hands cuffed behind her back. Her body was wrapped in black plastic bags and her head was wrapped in white plastic bags. Beneath the white plastic bags, duct tape covered her mouth and nose. The bottom of the freezer contained a frozen layer of bodily fluids. John Famolaro was immediately taken into custody and charged with first-degree murder. Thank goodness that this couple had the wherewithal to take down the license plate of this truck. I'm always so impressed by how observant people are and this gut feeling people get when something is just not right. Assuming the body had been frozen for some time, detectives knew that thawing it would cause rapid decomposition. In order to keep the body intact as long as possible for analysis, the entire freezer was brought to a forensics lab in Phoenix. The body in the bags was naked except for rings on her fingers. Using a hairdryer, forensic scientists slowly defrosted her fingers first in order to get fingerprints. Slowly and carefully, they were able to get a set of perfect fingerprints before the decomposition made them unreadable. The prints were a match for Denise Huber. Further analysis showed that her skull had been shattered from blunt force trauma. Armed with a search warrant, police searched Famalaro's home and the home of his mother, who lived next door. His mother and Famalaro owned both homes. Famalaro's mother was upset that the police were searching her homes and defiantly set up a lawn chair across the street from the homes, and so she spent the afternoon glaring at the police. How petty. Inside Famalaro's house, detectives found 2 boxes marked Christmas, but filled with contents that were anything but festive. The boxes contained the clothing that Denise Huber was wearing the night she went missing. Her high heels, driver's license, credit cards, lipstick, car keys, checkbook, makeup compact, purse, a set of handcuff keys, and a pair of Famalaro's jeans. Also inside one of the boxes was a Montgomery Ward department store receipt for the chest freezer. It showed that he purchased the freezer in California just days after Denise went missing. Both her clothes and his were covered with blood. DNA later taken from Denise's bone marrow matched the blood on his jeans. Semen stains found on her clothing matched Famalaro's DNA. Denise's high heels had damage to the backside of the heels, a sign that she had been dragged from behind. In the basement of the house, they found a dungeon that Famalaro had built. Oh my god, this is like a movie. Hanging in a closet was a Los Angeles County Sheriff's uniform, but Famalaro had never been a law enforcement officer. Dude, if this is one of those stories where he faked being a police officer to pull her over, I'm gonna lose it. They believed he had been using the uniform to gain the trust of women before abducting them. This man is trash. Also, inside the home, they found boxes of the same black and white plastic bags which Denise's body was wrapped in, along with the roll of duct tape. Further searches of the home produced a bloody hammer, a roofer's nail puller, and assorted guns and handcuffs. Forensic anthropologists reconstructed her shattered skull, showing that Denise had been beaten on the head with the nail puller 31 times. From pieces of white plastic embedded in the skull, they were able to determine that the plastic bags were over her head while she was being beaten. Detectives were troubled when they found more boxes containing women's clothes that didn't belong to Denise. They believed that this may not have been the first time, and Famalaro had possibly done this before. Police brought in cadaver dogs that found a scent which led straight to the basement. After days of excavating, however, the police found nothing. One of the boxes marked Christmas had an address on it for a rented warehouse space in Laguna Hills, California, just 20 miles from Newport Beach. Detectives found that Famalaro had lived in Newport Beach at the same time that Denise went missing and was renting the warehouse space for his painting business. When detectives entered Famalaro's former warehouse, they noticed a dark stain in the corner of the concrete floor and walls. Detectives sprayed luminol on the floor and walls of the warehouse, a chemical agent that fluoresces when it comes into contact with the iron compound in blood. The result was positive for massive amounts of blood that matched Denise's DNA. Prosecutors believed Famalaro posed as a sheriff's deputy, abducted Denise when her car broke down on the Corona Del Mar freeway, and took her to his nearby Laguna Hills, where he raped her and bludgeoned her. Disgusting. At trial, there was little doubt of Famalaro's guilt. Yeah, no kidding. The forensic evidence against him was undeniable. Forensic scientists testified that they found 7 specimens of his sperm in Denise's body. He knew he was going down. Facing the death penalty, Famalaro's best chance was to play the sympathy card. Maybe he could get life in prison rather than the death penalty. Excuse me, sir, I don't know what kind of sympathy you think that anybody would give you. Famalaro sobbed as the defense explained that he was a victim of mental and emotional stress brought on by his tyrannical mother and the sexual abuse he endured from his brother, a convicted child molester. Famalaro's brother, Warren Famalaro, was a reluctant witness at the trial and testified that their mother had indeed pushed their 90-year-old grandmother down a flight of stairs. However, he flatly denied sexually abusing his brother John. jury that John was a frail, sickly little boy with a nervous twitch and was bullied as a child. This family sounds like a hot mess. He went on to explain that their mother, Anne, bathed them until they were 10 years old and paid specific attention to scrubbing their genitals, explaining that, and here's a quote, "Her breathing changed, kind of escalated. It just felt like an energy surge of some kind for her." End quote. That is foul. That's disgusting. Clearly something bad was going on with these children and their mother, but that is still no excuse for what he did. Warren continued by saying that John would have extraordinary mood swings, quote, "just powerhouse beyond type A, very top-end manic," end quote, and would swing to, quote, "just barely able to breathe or keep his eyes open," end quote. He also said that when John's pregnant girlfriend left him and gave up their child for adoption, it crushed and devastated him. A main factor for why his girlfriend left him was John's mother, who had threatened to kill her. Ultimately, Famalera was found guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and sodomy. In September of 1977, a jury of 9 women and 3 men recommended that Famalera be sentenced to death. Executions in California were halted in 2019, and the last person executed was in 2006. As of the time of writing, John Famalera currently sits on death row in San Quentin State Prison. That prison is actually relatively close to where I live. Though capital punishment has not been abolished in California, it's likely that John Famalera will die in prison. So that concludes the case of the cold storage killer. I clearly gave my input on that case. I think what he did is absolutely horrific. What he potentially endured as a child is also horrific, but that's never an excuse for you to turn out as a abuser, a murderer, a rapist, whatever you want to call it. The things that happened to you in your childhood are never an excuse for the way that you treat people in your adult life. It's never an excuse. There was no reason for him to do such heinous things to this poor girl and apparently other ones that they think he may have killed along the way. This part of the book didn't discuss any other victims or if they were ever able to confirm if he had any other victims. But it sounds like he probably did along the way, and that's just absolutely devastating and breaks my heart for those families. Let me know what you think about this case in the comments below. I always love to hear from you guys, and I hope you enjoyed the video overall, and stay tuned for another video coming soon. I will see you